What is a man? Well, if you don't know the answer to that question, I can't help you. Now, what I can help you with is what a man needs. So ladies, if you have husbands that you love and care about, you're going to want to pay attention to today's show. We're going to be diving into the physical, to the nutritional, and to the emotional needs that your man has. We're going to discuss the do's and the don'ts for your man. We're going to be discussing the symptoms to watch out for, to know when his health is deteriorating. We're going to be talking about medications that can deplete his manhood. All those and more. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. You unlock this door with the key of compassion. Beyond it is another world, a world of science, a world of common sense, a world of sanity. You're moving into a land of both empathy and ethics, of nutritional knowledge and empowerment. You've just crossed over into Dr. Osborne's zone. Welcome to Dr. Osborne's zone. So much of the show is revolving around the needs of women, and women specifically with major forms of autoimmune disease and chronic inflammation. Tonight I want to focus a little bit on the needs of men, and especially for those women out there who are married and care about their men and want the health of their men to be better catered to. So let's dive into men's health tonight. So what do men need and what do they not need? Let's talk first about what I like to call the trifecta of a man's needs. I break it down into three categories: the physical, the emotional, as well as the nutritional. Ladies, if you are trying to help understand how you can best support and nourish your husband's health, these three categories are going to be an easy way for you to remember. So the first is the physical. Now, men need physical activity, a lot more actually than women do. This is one of the ways men deal with their emotions, is through physical movement and physical activity. If we don't have an outlet physically, then we become more aggressive emotionally, and we become more moody, we become more agitated and more irritable. So if your man is not exercising regularly or doesn't have some type of physical work or job, this is something you want to strongly encourage. And one of the best ways of encouragement that I've seen work, both in my own life but in a number of my patients' lives, is when where the woman has to prioritize her own exercise or her own fitness. A lot of times what happens when a woman is prioritizing exercise for herself, she's leading by example. Most men see that, and it's going to, at the very least, put a subtle kind of reminder in their own mind, or a subtle push in their own mind, that it's something they need to be more focused on, especially if they're gaining weight, especially as they've aged, if they've, grown that beer belly or that pot belly. So men need physical activity as a general rule of thumb. It varies from man to man, but weightlifting, working out, running, some form of cardiovascular training, something consistent in their schedules is going to be extremely helpful for them. I've seen a lot of men that are stuck at desks. So if you're a sedentary type and you're at a computer desk for the vast majority of your day, one of my favorite tools is a treadmill, a desk treadmill. You can just put it right underneath the desk, and instead of sitting all day, you can put in 3 or 4 miles on a treadmill, not even at a fast pace, just at a nice general walk. On my treadmill, I spend anywhere from 3 to 8 miles a day, sometimes more. Because of the amount of computer work that I do and the amount of phone calls that I'm on. So the desk treadmill could be a nice little solution if your man has a sedentary type of job. Beyond that, it's prioritizing the physical activity. And so making it a priority. And for men, what this usually equates to is putting it on their schedule. If it's not on their schedule, then it's not going to get done. If it's an afterthought at the end of the day, it's not going to get done. For me, again, my own personal life, every morning at 5:30 This is on my schedule. It's scheduled in, it's penciled in. I'm going to get my physical activity in one way or the other. So encourage your man to put it on his schedule, and this way it becomes a normal part of his habit, and he can take advantage of the enhanced activity and the physical activity. Aside from just the weight loss component or the staying physically fit component, there's so many other benefits to exercise. We've done entire shows on those benefits. You can go back and watch. Now, exercise is physical motion and movement that the man has to perform, but men also need physical stimuli and physical touch from their partners. Generally speaking, men are very physical creatures, if you will. And so if they have a wife or a woman in their life that is not attentive to the physical needs of the man, this is going to create some pretty big emotional problems. Well, we should draw that arrow the other way. Depression and lack of confidence are going to be big potential symptoms that can set in when a man doesn't receive enough physical touch or physical stimuli from his partner, from the woman he loves. So very, very important. You take physical into consideration. The man has to do his own physical work, and then there is definitely a role that the wife or the partner plays in this regard as well. And then we have the emotional aspects of what a man needs. A man needs family support. Family support, and I'm not talking about cousins and uncles and other relatives. I'm talking about immediate family, wife, children. That support core system is what makes a man feel valued. It's what gives a man purpose. If you think about the house, we always hear about women in their role in the home. I mean, that's just kind of been classic, right? But what is the man's role? If we really think about the man, if we look at, excuse my stick drawing, but whereas the woman is the heart of the house, right? She makes sure that everything on the inside is as it should be, right? That love is there, that there is great emotional support. Whereas a man is more like the walls, the roof, right? This is where men draw their purpose, because men generally are what? They're protectors. If they have great family support, they're going to feel better in that regard. So this is going to affect them emotionally. It's also going to help them be better providers. As generally speaking, again, men are the structure, women are the esoteric love aspect of the inside of the home, and we've got to make sure that men feel supported within their home. It makes them better providers. So family support, they need to feel appreciated in their home. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of just smattering men with compliments where they're not behaving like men. So I'm not telling you to coddle your men, ladies. I'm not telling you to, shower them in little white lies of support if they're not doing their part. Part of your job to emotionally support your husbands is to be honest, right? And so this really, we could add in what is really a core component of providing that support is being honest. And sometimes honesty is not what somebody wants to hear, but it's what they need to hear. I know my wife is fantastic at this. When there's a hard truth to be told, sometimes I stick my head in the sand. She'll be the first to jank it out of the sand and slap me and say, wake up, and give me constructive criticism in a loving way, right? That's support, right? Not support in a loving way is not the same thing as an insult. And so don't misconstrue what I mean here. I'm talking about honesty and love in your approach, to be honest and truthful with your man so that he can understand where he might need to change or where he might need to pivot in order to be, again, a better supporter, better provider. Men also need to feel like they're the leaders in the home. And so, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not a fool. My wife is pretty much a leader in the home, but she leads where where she is fantastic and I lead where I'm fantastic, and so we both have that role to play. It's a co-role. But men generally want to feel like they're in the driver's seat, just like when you're driving in the car with your husbands, they generally are the ones that want to drive. They need to feel like they're in the driver's seat as the leader in the home as well. They also need to be allowed to be men. And this is really probably super critical in today's day and age, because the social environment around gender and around men versus women, and we have all this rhetoric going around. We've had this decades of kind of an assault, if you will, emotionally on what it means to be a man. And what I refer to is this whole concept of toxic masculinity that you probably have all heard. And are there bad men? Sure. But are men toxic? Is masculinity a toxic thing? Is masculinity a dangerous or bad thing? And the answer is absolutely not. We need masculine men. We need strong men who are respected, who can be the protectors and be the providers in such a way where they're not being told that they're bad or they're evil as a result of being their nature. Not to try to compare men to dogs, but one of the things that different breeds of dogs, I'll use a German Shepherd as an example. A German Shepherd is a herding dog. They've been bred to be herding dogs for years and years and years. And so when they see herd animals like cows, one of the things they want to do is round them up and herd them and bark at them. That is their nature, right? And so we don't yell at the dog for having that nature. You shouldn't be angry at a man, or you shouldn't pronounce toxicity of manhood as a result of a man trying to be what a man is supposed to be, which again is a protector, a provider, among other things, a great father, should there be children involved, a role model, a leader spiritually, a leader as well, physically and nutritionally. So again, this attack socially on who men are, on the core values of what men should be, is something that a lot of men struggle with. And it's because we're so assaulted every day in the media, we're so assaulted every day in the news and the press, that it's become a major problem. And a lot of men deal with this again, emotionally. They develop depression, apathy, and really a lot of them even the opposite, right? Which is just really anger, right? Anger and bitterness. And so again, let men be men where it's not creating massive problems. And so again, men being men, I think that requires some definition as well, because being a man is not catcalling at a woman on the street. Being a man is not railroading all of your emotions into this closet door in your mind and having no emotional feedback. Men are emotional creatures as well. Men should be upstanding and respectable people and good people, in my opinion, God-fearing individuals that set great examples and try to grow and foster growth in their families and those around them. And so that is what being a man is about. I think we have, again, a social construct of how men have held everyone back and how men have held women back. And I think we have to come away from that, because the current situation that we're in, I mean, we just look at grade school, for example, where nowadays in grade school, when I was growing up, there was competition that was fostered and that was encouraged. Today, you've got kids that play sports and it's all about fun, and it doesn't matter who wins. And so there's never any, it's one of these things. It's one of these white lies, because sports are about competition. And for a man, competition is everything. And if you don't know that, you need to know that. Competition matters, competing matters, winning matters. Now, it's very different in terms of competition and winning at all costs, whether you're ethical or whether you're not. But men want to be competitive, and they want to win, and they want to be competent. And part of the reason why is it's ingrained in us. It is the nature of men. Again, allowing men to be men, part of that's why men love sports so much. It's competition, and they get to live vicariously through athletes on the field, whatever the sport might be. They get to live vicariously because in today's society, we've kind of taken competition for the youth and we've said everyone gets a trophy. We have, an entire generation of trophy winners. And these are, why did I say white lies? Why are these white lies? Because if you're not good at something, you shouldn't get a trophy just for participating. That takes away the value of competition. And so what it does is it takes young boys, when they become men, they don't understand that the world is about competition. And in many ways, the world is about winning at what you do. You want to be good at what you do. You don't have to beat everyone else into the ground or beat everyone else to a pulp in order to be on top, but you should strive for excellence in what you do as a man. And that is winning. Winning is bringing greater value to the world around you and uplifting others in the process. It's not about beating down your enemies, but there is competition to that. And there is a pride that men should be getting fostered around that. And so this trophy generation has kind of changed. And this is, again, it leads back to this, because when these young boys grow up and they get out in the real world and these things are very real, and women don't know what they want because they've had kind of some similar brainwashing around what a man should be and what a man is, then men seek out women less and women seek out men less. And so then there's all this emotion that occurs from anger, depression, apathy, etc. in life. And so again, the emotional needs of the man is not being met. And likewise, the emotional needs of the women aren't being met because there's so much utter confusion about what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman. Okay, so emotional being very, very important, a lot to unpack there. And then nutritionally, very, very important. What a man needs is real food first. This is kind of primary. What we live in, though, is, again, just like we see a trophy generation, we also see a chicken nugget generation, right? We see a candy bar generation that has evolved with highly processed and packaged foods. And so you cannot build a strong foundation for a man if you're not feeding the engine. Remember, the human body is such an amazing machine. Compare it to a sports car. You put premium gas in that car. You don't buy the cheapest, highest level of ethanol gas because you'll ruin the motor in that car. Well, your motor, your body is crucial and critical. So you've got to put premium gas in it. So real food is kind of primary, but I'll even go one step further, and we'll talk more in detail about this. But organic, for several different reasons. And then I would also encourage, depending on your husband, ladies, if he already does this, great. But a solid multivitamin is what this means, solid multivitamin. And an omega fatty acid supplement. These are two things that if they do nothing else in the nutritional realm, eating real food, and then two supplements I highly encourage and highly recommend. I mean, there's 1,000 different products out there, but these two, in my opinion, are absolutely crucial as a nutritional insurance plan for the health of your husband. Let's talk in a little bit more depth about why that nutrition is so important. These are 5 reasons. I mean, there are many more reasons than these 5, but these are 5 very important, we'll just call them manly reasons, why nutrition is so critical for your husbands. Number 1 is the production of testosterone. Testosterone is a very important hormone that regulates manliness, if you will, using a layman's terms, but it regulates bone growth, bone and muscle, and also brain preservation. Brain power is linked to adequate or normal levels of testosterone. So you need that. Now, you can't make testosterone, men, you can't make testosterone without nutrients like magnesium and zinc. These are critical nutrients that are playing a major role in the pathway of the production of testosterone. Of course, eating highly processed foods and chemicals or taking drugs that might deplete these nutrients are not going to do you any favors as it relates to your testosterone generation. We also know that testosterone is very, very important for the preservation and the health of the prostate. One of the things that we see, unfortunately, all too frequently is a removal of this critical gland. Removal, and a lot of times because of cancer. Now, Something, ladies, that you should know about prostate cancer and men is that in prostate cancer is less likely to kill your husband than age. In other words, men don't typically die of prostate cancer, but they will, if they live long enough, get prostate cancer. It's a slow-growing form of cancer. It's typically not a cause of mortality in men, but the fear of cancer, the ungodly fear of cancer in humans, unfortunately, doctors use that fear a lot of times to drive men to have their prostates removed. And this can be devastating for a man for many ways. The biggest impact I've seen, aside from it not really dealing with the cancer, because a lot of the times they remove the gland, what they end up doing is they damage a man's sex life, which is a huge part of his need, right? A man needs, remember we talked about in the first slide, the three primary areas, one of them being physical touch and physical connection. And so the removal of the prostate, running the risk for damaging that man and creating irreparable harm and damage to a man's ability to have sex, is something that you really, really want to weigh heavily. And so don't let that fear. My advice to any of you who have been told you have prostate cancer, ladies, if you have husbands that have been told they have prostate cancer, and they're saying remove the prostate, you get a second opinion, and then you get a third opinion. I've seen this time and time again. This is not, I'm not trying to damn all urologists or prostate docs, but some of them are going to go buy a new boat. Some of them are going to go buy a new house. And these surgeries are extremely expensive and they pay the bills. And so there's an incentivization for them to be performed. Again, I'm not saying that's what happened to you if it happened, but that's why we have second and third opinions. And because a lot of times I'll have a patient who comes to see me, this is what they're being told. I tell them you need to go get a second opinion. They go back and get a second opinion, and the opinion of the second doctor is totally different. It is, no, we absolutely do not need to remove your prostate gland. This is a very, very slow-growing cancer. You don't need to worry about it. You're going to die probably before any kind of cancer creates a problem for you. So always get those other opinions. Man needs his prostate to stay intact. And be very, very functional. The other thing that a man needs that testosterone for is going to be muscle growth. Muscle growth, and really not even so much growth unless a man is under-muscled and starting to work out and is going to put some muscle on, but it's more specifically muscle maintenance, just to maintain what you have. There's a term being used now in medicine referred to sarcopenia, which is age-related loss of muscle. And you don't want that to happen to your husband. Guys, you don't want that to happen to you. And in order to maintain good muscle, you need to maintain good levels of testosterone. We're going to talk more about things that you can do that will damage your testosterone production. But again, nutrition, super critical for this. I mentioned magnesium, I mentioned zinc. We could throw protein into that mix too, especially in today's rhetoric of plant-based diets coming to the front as being somehow healthier. What's interesting is you need protein to make testosterone, fellas, and you need protein for muscle growth and for your bone maintenance. There's actually a research study that just came out on, and this was a study done on women who were vegan. So vegan women could reduce their bone loss by increasing their protein intake by 25 grams per day. And this is not just true of women, this is also true of men. Men also need to be cognizant and aware that they need to get adequate protein to maintain their muscle and bone. So again, good nutrition. If we cater ourselves to a bunch of high carbohydrate processed foods and don't take care to eat enough meat, and again, women, reason why I'm talking to you about this is because the amount of times I've seen a wife badger a husband about eating too much meat. You know, this is kind of a cliche in our society, where unfortunately again, the nutritional information around cardiovascular disease, which is a major, killer of men, where meat gets the blame. And so, the cardiologist, hammers the wife badgers the husband to not eat as much meat, to eat more vegetables, which then lowers his protein. And now he's not going to make as much testosterone. He's going to start losing muscle. He's going to become less manly in the process of protecting himself from heart disease. So ladies, please don't badger your husband about his meat consumption. Meat is a very, very important part and can be a great part and a healthy part of a man's diet. So don't take it away from him, or don't present him with fear that if he eats it, it's going to increase his risk for the development of disease. And all things within reason. I'm not saying to have, a 16-ounce steak for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but don't take meat off the dinner table. And man's got to get enough protein. And an aging man, we're talking 60 plus, on average needs about 1.2 to 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So if he's not getting that, if you've taken this off the table, it's harder to get that. It's extremely hard to get that. And again, all these consequences of the lack of nutritional protein coming through in the diet are going to lead to the deterioration of his manliness, of his manly health. We also know that nutrition is very critical for brain power, which most men need, especially if they're still breadwinners, especially if they're still out trying to hunt and gather, so to speak, for their families. They need their brain power to function adequately. There are a number of chemicals that the brain uses to think. I mean, we think about neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine and acetylcholine. Where do those come from? They come from diet. They come from protein, amino acids. They come from vitamins, and they come from minerals. And so if a man has a poor diet that is protein malnourished and there's not adequate nutrition because he's eating a lot of high-calorie foods that have low nutritional density, it's going to impact his ability to think. It's going to impact his ability to remember. Of course, there are lots of different diseases associated with aging as men get older, not just heart disease, but also dementia or Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, etc. All conditions that we know can dramatically impact the way a man thinks. And so, again, we want to keep all of these 5 reasons as intact as possible, so nutrition becomes very critically important. Beyond just eating organic food and whole food and taking a good quality multivitamin, there's some other things that we can do. So it's not just what you add, but it's also some things that you take away. So these are what we would call things that men don't need in their diets or in their lifestyles, right? So they don't. One of the things is man-stealing chemicals. What do I mean by man-stealing chemicals? Well, this is why I said earlier organic food becomes more important. A lot of people have a hard time justifying the cost of organic food, but I'm of the opinion that one of the biggest reasons why, let's just take a diversion here, one of the biggest reasons why we see the feminization of men, and this is in pretty much every, it's in industrialized cultures. So, we're talking about US, UK, Europe. We see this process occurring. And again, these are industrial countries. Where we don't see this so much is in poorer regions where there's a lack of industry and a lack of processed food consumption, etc. So these man-stealing chemicals, like atrazine is one of the examples, which is a herbicide, mimics estrogen. So it is an estrogen mimic. We have things like glyphosate. We have the bisphenols, the BPAs, and the other BPs, or the phthalates, if you will. These are all estrogen mimicking chemicals. We have a variety of processed food additives and dyes. preservatives that behave like estrogen. A lot of the compounds that are found in soaps and detergents act like estrogen. So we have this onslaught of toxic estrogen soup. No offense, ladies, but these are chemicals that men are being exposed to from conception through pregnancy. As boys growing, babies growing to boys, as boys growing to teenagers, as teenagers growing to men, we have this feminization that we have seen over the past 40, 50 years. And this is, a number of scientists are talking about this. It's kind of the 10,000 pound elephant in the room that a lot of people are shying away from because of the culture that we're in now around sex and gender. And there's just such a, there's such a harsh attack on anyone who will call this out. And look, I'm a sexual libertarian. If you're gay, if you're lesbian, I could care less. I love you just as much. I just want the truth to come out. If we are exposing children to this large quantity of known estrogens that we know in animals can cause sex changes in animals, we have to start thinking about how it might be impacting young men as well as young women. But we do, and we are seeing this happen. This is becoming more and more common. And so when we have these types of things, what we're doing is we're having men that are growing up that are more confused, not necessarily because it's 100% that they're born that way, but in large part it can also be playing a role is that they're being exposed to things that if we could take away these exposures, we could improve the quality of their life. We could decrease the confusion around how they're feeling because, again, these chemicals can manipulate the body on a hormonal level. Again, they're endocrine disrupting chemicals. It's very well researched and very well studied. And there's so many of them now. So man-stealing chemicals are something we want to try to minimize. So this is why we want to eat organic food. This is why we want to try to avoid packaged food items and processed chemical compounds, food dyes, food preservatives, food additives. This is why we want to avoid drinking out of plastics, eating out of plastics, cooking or heating food up in plastics. These are, again, plastics contain these phthalate-based chemicals that mimic estrogen. So again, get this stuff out of your house. Protect your young boys, protect your men, protect your pregnancies by avoiding exposure to these things as much as you possibly can. Men also don't need enabling spouses or parents. We talked earlier about the white lies, right? And this is, you know, sometimes we think, oh, it's just a little white lie, it won't hurt. But if the white lies are enabling behaviors that are not manly, that are not conducive to the growth of a man, then they are hurting him. The little things add up. Just like with chemicals, it's the little things cumulatively over time that are adding up. Well, it's the little lies that enabling allow for men to happen. And so, you know, classic example of this is when little lies are spoken that take away, and I shouldn't say take away because, you know, ultimately any man with his right head on his shoulders is not going to be solely dependent upon people around him enabling him. He's going to want to take ownership of his own choices and his own decisions. But it is better if he's got great support around him, where he's got an honesty checkbook, and he can not enable himself either, right? So men need to grow. One of the things that happens emotionally to men who are being enabled, again, whether it's, you know, through parents enabling or whether through spouse enabling, or culture or society enabling. There are a lot of ways that men are enabled in society today. I look at the welfare system as a whole, the way it's set up. Is it set up to punish people who want to do better and get ahead and go to school and get an education and become self-sufficient? It punishes those people and it keeps them on welfare. This is an enabling behavior that the government has. So it's not, you know, again, it's not always the people that we love. Sometimes it's the bodies that be that stifle the ability for a man to grow because they punish him for growing. Society, unfortunately, has done a lot of that, punishing for improvement or punishing for growth. But men need to grow, and that's part of the conundrum that we're in. When a man isn't growing intellectually, spiritually, physically, when a man stops growing, he starts to mourn. So when he's not growing, He starts mourning, and this is where depression, lack of purpose, and self-isolationism all can set in. And it's what we want to try to avoid, because again, remember, a man needs a purpose, right? And his family helps him with that. A man needs to feel accomplished. A man needs to feel like he's growing. A man needs emotional support systems and people support systems around him. So this lack of growth leads to kind of this paradoxical change or change of structure of behavior, and that's a problem for men. So enabling is a terrible, terrible thing. So this, again, just reiterating, ladies, always be honest. Always be honest with your husbands, even if it hurts, but do so in a lovingly way so that he can not react with anger and aggression, but can react with hopefully a calm and loving manner back, and accept the constructive criticism and grow from it. We also know that men don't need this, excessive alcohol. This is a big one. There's a lot of debate in the psychology literature and in the addiction literature about how much alcohol is too much alcohol to call somebody an alcoholic. So excessive alcohol, what does that look like? Well, if we're talking about excessive alcohol in a man, if a man is drinking on a nightly basis and he's overweight and he gets irate, then it's excessive, even if it's one drink a night. So alcohol, it's one of those areas where, me personally, I can tell you about myself. I drink a few times a year, but by no means do I drink every night or even once a week or even once a month. This is more of an occasional celebratory time. Now, that wasn't always the case. We all have our bouts with alcohol. I drank a lot more in college, probably drank a lot more as a young man, realized and learned lessons from those endeavors that probably wasn't the best thing for my health or the best thing for my career or my advancement in life. But this is, understand, for men, a lot of times when they're here, because of a lack of this, a lack of growth, this becomes a coping mechanism when they're not happy. Because what does the alcohol do? The alcohol shuts down feelings of depression. It shuts down, it numbs what they're feeling. If they feel a lack of purpose, it numbs that feeling. And so they're using it's a self-medication of sorts. And so you have to be careful where that line is. Is a man drinking because he's really self-medicating his issue here, or is he drinking because he likes to have an occasional drink and he's not an excessive drinker? Again, tread lightly here, because some men, you have to go at them with the right mindset and the right conversation, or they're going to become very aggressive and angry at you for trying to take away something that they're using as a medication. Remember, addiction can be a very, very powerful detriment, and so you have to approach this one delicately, but don't not approach it if you feel like it's a problem. Then we have things like sugar, which is pure empty calories, sodas, candies, sugar-loaded, processed, carbohydrate-laden foods that don't give anything other than a dopamine high, right? So sugar is like the instant gratification. It's the instant reward that makes life more bearable for some men who, again, aren't doing this, aren't focused here. So sugar should be one of the first things that you cut. Sugar, in my opinion, should not be part of the diet, on any regular basis at all. Trans fat is another big one for men, especially because of its role with heart disease. And so this is, going back historically, I was kind of picking on women earlier about badgering their husbands to take away the meat because of the risk of heart disease being a myth. I'll remind you that we were told for how many years, almost 50 years, that margarine, which is basically a trans fat, it's hydrogenated vegetable oil. Technically, it's not even vegetable oil. It's a hydrogenated canola or corn oil, or other processed seed oils where they force hydrogen into the oil using a heavy metal catalyst, and they form something called trans fat. Well, for years we were being told that was healthier than butter, and we were being told to eat that nonsense, right? And so we were driving heart disease up as a result of and this was cardiology advice. This was, the American Heart Association and other groups across the globe were saying, eat this trans fat, it's better for you than meat. And they drove heart disease up in that process. So we now know that, fortunately. So look, there shouldn't be any doubt. If this is in your diet, you want to get it out. And so trans fat, again, that's going to be mostly processed seed oils that are put in processed food products. So if you're not eating processed food, if you're cutting out all that nonsense, you're not really going to be exposed to any trans fat. Now understand too that saturated fat, which is what's in meat, so saturated is not the same thing as trans. So what we could say is all trans fat is saturated, but not all saturated fat is trans fat. Trans fat is typically, it's man-made. Again, we pump hydrogen into fat to make it solid at room temperature. Saturated fat is just naturally got hydrogen bonds in it, and so it's solid at room temperature. And so this would be like animal fat is saturated. Now, there's no research studies that show that saturated animal fat increases the risk for heart disease. There's a lot of anecdote, and there's a lot of epidemiological evidence that's been misconstrued and has been used in a misleading way. But there's no real evidence that shows that eating animals increases the risk of heart disease as a result of the saturated fat consumption. It's about the trans fat. So get the trans fat out of the diet. And then again, there's drugs. And whether it's illicit drugs, one of the things that I've actually abhorred watching is the legalization of marijuana. And not that I'm opposed to somebody using marijuana, but I believe that, well, I need to tread lightly here, but a lot of people, you have to understand that these new marijuana strains that they're growing are vastly stronger. They're chemically manipulated to be stronger than the classic, hemp marijuana that's grown. So my point is a lot of the new drugs that are coming out that are now legal are anywhere from 2 to 10 times more powerful. We're seeing ER rooms being much busier with severe psychological issues that occur after the use of marijuana. And so again, it's not something I'm happy about. I think we need to go back to the drawing board and look at this a little bit more intelligently. I think there's a reason that it's called dope. I'm not saying that if you use it on an occasion, that I'm not trying to criminalize you. What I'm really trying to say is where we see people get in trouble, just like with alcohol, is if it becomes a habit, if it becomes a regular part of daily use, then there's a price that's going to happen. There's a price that's going to be paid. And so it's not even just marijuana. There are plenty of other drugs, street drugs, that could also pose a problem for a man. But the biggest problem, in my opinion, isn't even really the illicit or the illegal drugs so much as it is the medications that are justified to treat illness. Remember that medicine today is the third leading cause of death. And this has been studied. There's very valid, very solid research studies that have shown this. Number one is heart disease. And then we have, so that number one, and then we have number two, which is cancer. And then again, number three, which is medications. So the irony here is that if a man has heart disease, if a man has cancer, generally what's going to happen is they're going to get prescribed medications. And so you look at the medications and you say, well, if medications are the third leading cause of death, so where are we going wrong? What did we do wrong here? What approach do we need to, how do we need to do this differently? Especially knowing that cancer is largely diet and environmental. So all the changes we've talked about, eating real food, mitigating chemical exposures, etc., are important as reducing your relative risk of developing, or your actual risk of developing cancer over a lifetime, as well as heart disease. Heart disease is predominantly diet. And so you look at some of the medicines. The statins are very commonly prescribed. The blood pressure medications, very commonly prescribed. The diabetes, which is associated with the heart disease, very commonly prescribed. Like, these are big ones, right? And if you look at the side effects of these medications on your husbands, you know, what are you going to get with a statin? You're going to get CoQ10, vitamin D depletion. Same thing with blood pressure meds, by the way. So we'd actually put kind of both of these in this category of CoQ10 and vitamin D deficiency. But then with blood pressure medicines, you also get B vitamin deficiencies. You get magnesium, zinc, calcium deficiencies. You know, what did we say earlier? You need magnesium and zinc to make testosterone. Well, you need CoQ10 to build muscle and to maintain muscle energy. You need vitamin D to maintain muscle and to maintain mineral balance. And so what happens is, you know, your husband, you know, develops one of these conditions, like heart disease, again, which is mostly more, again, common in men. So it starts with weight gain. Weight gain leads to high blood pressure. The high blood pressure leads to increased risk for heart disease. Doctor checks your husband's cholesterol. Oh, got to put him on statins. We're going to put him on blood pressure medicine. By the way, your blood sugar's up a little bit too high here, and so now we're going to put you on diabetic medication. Diabetic medication causes CoQ10, folate, and vitamin B12 deficiency. You know, again, this trifecta right here actually causes heart disease. So when you're deficient in these nutrients, it actually increases the risk for heart disease, congestive heart failure, high blood pressure, etc. So again, we're justifying the use of these medications to treat these illnesses, and the very medicines that are being used to treat the illnesses are the third leading cause of death. And this is so common for men, and men generally have great trust in their doctors because men are fix-it kind of guys, and so when they go to the doctor, usually they have to be forced, right? Usually men will stoically go through their life without going to the doctor. They could have an arm falling off of their body and they still don't want to go to the doctor, and usually it's their wives that drag them into the doctor out of fear for some of these different types of medical conditions. But this is where you have to be careful, because if you get into this polypharmacy trap where, you know, again, where your man's diet is bad, his exercise is not part of his priority, his growth is not part of his priority, he's not looking at the world in a logical and solid way around his diet and lifestyle choices, and so he becomes sick as a result of that, and then the medicines are given as a result of that, and then the nutritional deficiencies follow as a result of that, and then those nutritional deficiencies lead to increased risk of the very disease he's being treated for in the first place. So again, it's a trap, it's a trick. And so, you know, this is also true of other medicines. So you got antacids, which cause mineral deficiencies. You know, it's common. Men will eat bad food and complain about heartburn, and then they'll pop Tums, Rolaids, or take Protonics, or, you know, go to their doctor or get prescribed Nexium or something like that. Painkillers, huge problem. I mean, just aspirin alone kills about 12,000 people a year, and when you add opiates and other painkillers to that list, I think it was Thomas Friedman, don't quote me, I think that's who it was, of the FDA, that said that we've never seen in the history of medical prescription that a drug being prescribed so frequently that so easily and readily is causing death. Painkillers. If you haven't seen Dope Sick, it's a great documentary. You can also read the book if you like to read books. It's called Dope Sick. It talks about the opioid crisis in the United States, but these are huge issues that men are facing, because again, when their bodies deteriorate, they're going to have pain, they're going to have arthritis, and they're going to want to grab this. And the commercials on TV, you know, you watch the nightly news. I don't personally, but if you turn it on, every other commercial's about something on this list. And so there's a huge influence that your husband may be under, especially if he is partaking in that nightly news. Again, I think it was 80-90% of the pharmaceutical of the media's revenue comes from pharmaceutical ads directly off of the news. So again, a lot of influence there if your husband's, you know, a news junkie. So, and then again, antidepressants, because if he's not growing, remember what we talked about earlier, psychologically, emotionally, depression can be one of the side effects, and so antidepressants and stimulants are sometimes also used so that he can perform better at work, right? So for work performance enhancement, these drugs cause B vitamin deficiencies, and they also put the adrenal glands under tremendous pressure to produce stress hormone. And so multiply that over years, and what you end up having is a man whose ability to tolerate and handle stress deteriorates at a much more rapid rate, and so it dwindles him and makes him less than what he could be. It makes him less than he could potentialize. So I want to talk next about some of the subtle symptoms. So these are things that you want to look out for. If these things are happening to your man, it's time to sit down and probably have a conversation, a loving conversation about your concern. So one would be being overly fatigued. A man should not get home from work and come home from work and be tired and cranky. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying a man can't come home sometimes and be tired and cranky because he's had a bad day. That happens. But if this is happening repetitively and it's new, this is something you want to be on the lookout for, especially going back to the different medications, especially if he started a new medication. Probably, arguably in my experience anyway, the big one here is this. The second big one is this one. So if we're talking about chronic fatigue, again, for fatigue, these two are huge. And so if your husband or man has been put on one of those recently and now he's overly fatigued, tired all the time, you got to pay attention to that, because that could just very well be the medicines that are, again, they're robbing his nutrients. Then you have reduced focus. And I see this a lot in men. They actually come to me, and the reason they're coming to me is because they can't get through their day without focusing. They can't get through their day without the way they could function. And it's because they can't focus on tasks or complete tasks that are required of them. And so this is part of, again, what I was talking about earlier, is this a lot of times where they get put on stimulants as a solution to that. But what really should happen, and this is true of any of these symptoms, what should you do? What should you encourage your husbands to do should they're struggling in these ways? Nutritional testing. This is where I would start. Now, if we're talking about visiting doctors, okay, if we're talking about encouraging to do other things, I would encourage them to eat real food. I would encourage them to cut out sugar and alcohol. I would encourage them to go to bed on time and to start exercising, to get sunshine. Fundamental things. We've talked about, the 6 crucial fundamentals that are not negotiable for good health, and that being the right diet, the right amount of sleep, the right amount of exercise, the right amount of sunshine, clean air, and clean water. Those 6 things are free. You're going to buy food anyway, so those 6 things are free as far as what you're currently doing. They're just lifestyle adjustments. But beyond that, let's say you're beyond that and your husband has made those lifestyle adjustments, now you got to go here, because it's very possible he's malnourished. And nutritional deficiencies can account for a lot of these different types of symptoms in men, especially B vitamins and nutrients like CoQ10 can really, really drag a man down over time. So getting that tested might be very, very helpful, so that he can either accommodate his diet by eating more foods that contain those nutrients, or by even potentially supplementing. Okay, mentally disengaged. Again, in reduced focus, mentally disengaged. So if a husband is usually rather engaging, and this is a change, right? Then that's a warning sign that something's going on in his health, potentially in his mind, but also potentially in just the way that he feels overall about where he's at in life. Apathy, a lack of care about anything, a lack of desire, lack of drive or motivation. This is a hallmark. We see this a lot with low testosterone. And so it's something that, again, going to the doctor, if you're going to do any kind of testing, nutritional testing, because you need nutrients to make testosterone, but also measure that baseline of that testosterone, because a lot of times you get a baseline and you start changing nutrition, you see that baseline come up, you know just how much that nutrition can affect the outcome. Irritability, as well as low sex drive. Healthy man will have a healthy sex drive. A man with heart disease and diabetes will have a poor sex drive. Central weight gain, so gaining weight around the midsection. This can be man boobs, right? So men that start to develop fat around the breast tissue, men that are growing large love handles or having a kind of a what they classically refer to as a beer belly. These are all kind of signs of visceral fat storage. This is the type of fat that stores around organs. So it's the dangerous type of fat storage. It stores around the heart, stores around the omentum in the intestine. We don't want that central weight gain, okay? Now, it's possible a man can gain weight just by eating too many calories and not exercising enough over some time, but where we don't want to see it is that central storage. Bad breath. Bad breath is a hallmark of gut problems or gut dysfunction. Again, we see this a lot in men who drink a lot of alcohol, who overconsume caffeine beverages or overconsume coffee. So this may be a cue in for you to help him change his diet a little bit there. Swelling of the ankles is a big one too. This can be an early sign of weakening of the heart muscle. Which will lead to ultimately congestive heart failure. And the treatment generally for something like this is a diuretic. So the doctor gives blood pressure medicine, usually a diuretic like a thiazide diuretic or a Lasix. These drugs like this, the problem with them, again, doesn't fix why the ankles are swelling. It just gets rid of the water. But diuretics, unfortunately, increase the risk of developing congestive heart failure because they deplete vitamin B1. And swelling of the ankles may just be a vitamin B1 deficiency. So if you see that happening, if his socks are leaving major indentations when he's taking them off of his feet at night, if his toes look more swollen or his feet look more swollen, this is, again, a good opportunity for you to have a conversation. And then number 10, general aches and pains. If your husbands are complaining of the inability to move or to be physical or to get up and walk around or to get up and do things, and the problem is getting worse and progressing, this is a sign of inflammation, right? So this is a general. A lot of these symptoms, again, they're general, but they're early warning symptoms to look out for. But inflammation has a root cause. Generally, we don't just start hurting. We don't just start developing general aches and pains. This is typically an inflammatory process unless there's trauma. Now, if there's no trauma, if there's not like a broken bone or a strain or a sprain, or he wasn't working out and overdid it, then we're talking about inflammation as being the primary driver or culprit here. And if it's inflammation, that means, remember what inflammation causes. It causes every known chronic degenerative disease. It enhances them all. So it's going to accelerate the aging process. It's going to lead to an earlier demise of your man. And obviously you don't want that, or you wouldn't be watching this show. So look out for these 10 symptoms as kind of early warning signs, because these are going to be the things that happen before the heart attack a lot of times, or before a stroke, or before a major diagnosis. So these are the subtle things that can happen before your husband goes in to see the doctor. Because again, once that happens, once he makes his way into the doctor, if he's got any of those diseases, latently, this is going to be the solution. I promise you, that's what his doctor's going to want to do. And a lot of men trust their doctors. They just have an implicit trust. And that, again, that's not a bad thing, but it's not a good thing if the doctor's not creating viable solutions for your man to follow. If your doctor's just wanting to handicap him with more drugs that cause nutritional problems, then it's not going to do your husband any favors in the long term. So, ladies, I hope this was helpful for you. I hope that you can walk away from this not with anger about some of the things I said, but with action steps and with knowledge that you can have a meaningful and deep conversation with your men to help them understand how they can improve their health. And hopefully, many of you watching this, your husbands are already healthy and already doing a lot of the things that we talked about today. And so maybe this is just reinforcement for them. And thank you so much for tuning in to Dr. Osborne Zone. We'll see you in the next show. Thanks for tuning in to the Dr. Osborne Zone. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe for more content like this. And make sure you come back next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time and Thursday at noon 30 for more episodes.